So welcome to the Sustainable Farm Management Series. This is part 2, Nutrient Management and Soil Health, and it's hosted by the Northeast Organic Farmers Association, NOFA, New Jersey, through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Part 1 focused on the conservation planning process, and we used soil loss in agriculture as the primary resource concern in the presentation. We discussed the steps of the planning process and what to expect from your conservation planner. We learned about vegetative management and structural conservation practices. I will be presenting again tonight. I own and operate KES LLC as a private enterprise. At KES, my main role involves assisting farmers in the conservation planning process and formalizing the plan into a documented format. Often I do this as a technical service provider through NRCS. The plans can be general conservation plans, often used for preservation farms, preserved farms in New Jersey. They can be soil health plans, nutrient management plans, or transition to organic farming conservation plans. As I move through this presentation, I will provide QR codes for some of the resources I use that will facilitate direct access for your further investigation. Therefore, please prepare your QR code readers for immediate utilization. And then just in case you're concerned about QR code tracking, I have not set that up on my end, and the websites that I'm presenting are reliable sources through extension sites, federal sources, and so on. This presentation, our primary focus is going to be on improving soil health and highlighting the vital role of available nutrients for your crops. We'll cover different facets, beginning with the fundamental importance of maintaining healthy soils. After that, we'll explore practical nutrient management strategies that you can seamlessly incorporate into your agricultural practices. The presentation will also include soil microbial activity, where we'll discuss both challenges and solutions related to this farming approach. To conclude, we'll take a closer look at the broader environmental impacts of these practices. But just like in part 1, I should start off by inserting a plug for our sponsors. The Transition to Organic Partnership Program is a comprehensive initiative designed to support farmers during their journey toward organic agricultural practices. This program provides farmers with resources, guidance, and assistance as they navigate the complexities of transitioning their conventional farming operations to certified organic methods. By offering technical expertise and access to resources and mentors, the program's goal is to ease the challenges associated with the transition process. While this is a transition to organic funded presentation, the information is very general in nature and relevant to all production operations. I'd like to start by asking, to what extent does healthy soil affect our lives? The following is from the homepage of the Soil Health Institute. Enriching soil health enhances life from the microscopic scale to the global scale. Adopting soil health systems can increase microbial diversity, improve farmer livelihood, increase agricultural productivity, and build climate resilience. As a result, downstream communities receive cleaner water, ecosystem health is restored, rural landscapes are sustained, and climate change is held in check for future generations. I'm going to present this slide again, even at the risk of being redundant from part 1 of this series. I guess it's my favorite quote from H.H. Bennett. It's from his address to the Association of American Geographers. It was titled Adjustment of Agriculture to its environment. It says if we are bold in our thinking, courageous in accepting new ideas, and willing to work with instead of against our land, we shall find in conservation farming an avenue to the greatest food production the world has ever known. To set the stage for this presentation, I want to focus on this illustration. You don't need to etch it into your gray matter because by the end of the presentation, I hope to have done that for you. It divides the 4 principles of soil health into 2 primary categories: feed the soil and protect the soil. Under feed the soil, we're encouraged to maximize continuous living roots and maximize biodiversity. And to protect the soil, it's important to minimize disturbance and maximize soil cover. This illustration is from the newly released soil health source, Farming with Soil Life, a handbook for supporting soil invertebrates and soil health on farms. I'll present a list of sources used in this presentation at the end for your reference. Let's start off by really defining soil health. Soil health is the suite of biological, chemical, and physical properties which enable soils to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains all life above and underneath the soil surface. I like that it emphasizes the physical, biological, and chemical components of the soil. It also draws attention to the fact that soil has a job to do, to function as a vital living ecosystem. The productionist in me really appreciates this. And it closes with sustaining all life above and below the surface. We are going to attempt to address all 3 of these properties today, but my plan is to focus on 2 primary areas. Chemistry is going to be covered as I discuss nutrient management, and the physical and biological processes are going to be covered as I discuss resource concerns and the associated conservation practices that treat them. This figure is from Brady and Weil, The Nature and Properties of Soils. It shows the availability of nutrients, fungi, bacteria, actinomycetes across various soil pH. This scale is specific to most crops, and I'm sure that many of us can name exceptions. It is important to point out, though, that fungi are pretty much available, fully available at all soil pHs, but bacteria and actinomycetes become fully available at a soil pH of about 5.5. Therefore, properly adjusted pH is important for more than just the nutrient availability. Since the print on this figure caption is so small, I'm going to read it. Relationships existing in mineral soils between pH on the one hand and activity of microorganisms and availability of plant nutrients on the other. The wide portion of the band indicates the zone of the greatest microbial activity and the most ready availability of nutrients. When the correlation as a whole are taken into consideration, a pH range of about 5.5 to 7 seems to promote the best availability of plant nutrients. In short, if soil pH is suitably adjusted for phosphorus, then the other plant nutrients, if present in adequate amounts, will be satisfactorily available in most cases. So that's the end of that caption there. And the key phrase in this is if present in adequate amounts. And this is where chemical analysis and soil testing and soil health biological testing is going to be very important. We're going to take a look at the chemical analysis soil testing first. This is an example soil test report from Waypoint Analytical. In this soil test report, the phosphorus and potassium, both important for root growth and development, are somewhat low. And the report gives you a recommendation for how to adjust it based on the crop you selected. In this case, it's wheat, and it gives you PTO5 amount of potash amount for the adjusted for the yield goal there. So we'll get into the biological and physical components of soil health first, but I wanted to just take a minute and think about what it's, I guess we'll get into the physical and biological components next, but I wanted to take just a minute and think through what it means to optimize nutrient management in an agricultural setting. So number one, what we need to start with is assessing the crop's requirements for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other necessary nutrients. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. Number two, we need to acknowledge all the significant sources within the system, including the nitrogen contribution from cover crops and the mineralization of nitrogen based on historical inputs like manures, organic byproducts, etc. Number three, we'll need to establish the target rate for our nutrient application. And this would, of course, be the difference between the crop's needs and the credited nutrients, whether they be in the soil already or from one of those other sources. And number four, we need to examine the probability of nutrients migrating beyond the field's boundaries. This gets into the P index and the nitrate index. We're not going to cover that much today. And number five, we get into computing the stable, we need to get into computing the suitable rate for the application of manure or organic products based on the associated risk. The scope of nutrient management in both organic and conventional farming methods is extensive. Numerous valuable resources are available to aid independent exploration of this topic. And in this presentation, I will highlight some particularly useful resources, offering a concise overview of their content. This is a Penn State document titled Using Organic Nutrient Sources. The purpose of this guide is to assist growers in understanding how to apply soil test recommendations when using organic nutrient sources. From a nutrient perspective, the information provided is relevant to both organic and conventional farming practices, but it does focus on typical organic sources of nutrients and on the National Organic Program rules. When utilizing organic nutrient sources like compost, manure, green manures, meals, and similar materials, it's essential to adapt the recommendations to meet the specific nutrient requirements of the crop. Soil test reports typically do not offer precise guidance for the application of fertilizers or the amendments. And this is because the nutrient content and the availability of these materials can vary significantly, and it depends on factors like their source, storage methods, and the composition of the materials used to create the nutrient source. If you'll recall from the soil sample report that I showed, it didn't actually say how to accomplish the addition of nutrients that it recommended. Okay, so when evaluating nutrient management in organic systems, you'll want to consult Section 205.203 of the National Organic Program regulations to ensure that what you're doing matches with the standards. My personal recommendation is to use animal manures as much as possible if you have a phosphorus deficiency. And remember from the slide earlier, we talked about building up the phosphorus content first and then seeing what else needed to be adjusted after that. However, do not become dependent on animal manures for nitrogen supplies because, of course, the animal manures have phosphorus in them also, and the phosphorus can build up in the soil if it's overutilized. After your phosphorus levels have been brought up to an optimum level, reduce the amount of animal manures you use for the nitrogen component. Use manures only for maintaining the phosphorus at optimum levels. For nitrogen, switch to relying on cover crops and optimizing the soil organic matter. And this will be the most cost-effective method for supplying your crops the nutrients they need. I will point out that regarding animal manures, the NOP regs refer to raw animal manure and say that it must be composted unless it is, number one, used on land where crops are grown that people don't eat directly. Number two, incorporated into the soil at least 120 days before harvesting crops that touch the soil. And number three, incorporated into the soil at least 90 days before harvesting crops that don't touch the soil. Organic farmers often cultivate diverse crops on limited acreage. The extent of this presentation is to help facilitate the nutrient management in those systems. To create an effective nutrient management plan, categorize crops with similar growth habits and nutrient requirements. Treating the nutrient needs of these groupings as a unified entity can streamline management. This publication recommends groupings based on the nutrient requirements of your crops. In organic systems, crop rotations are mandatory, and growers should incorporate a crop rotation plan into the overall organic system plan associated with the nutrient requirements of the crops in the system. For this guide, I'm going to apologize in advance because it includes stacked screenshots as I quote unquote scroll through the web page, but the QR code won't be covered up. Soil test recommendations for for commercial vegetables is another resource that I would recommend. As you see in this screenshot, it provides soil sample submission forms, a sample report, and a lime and magnesium recommendation table. Scroll down the page and it also provides soil test recommendations, nutrient and soil pH recommendations for a wide variety of crops. Scroll 2/3 of the page of the way down to the bottom, and you'll find this recommendation for mixed vegetable crops. It's a PDF that looks like this. And I don't know if you can tell in this screenshot, but it provides various nitrogen recommendations based on categories according to the pounds per acre. For instance, it starts at 175 pounds per acre of nitrogen required, for instance, for celery. It includes vegetable groups for 130, 90, and 45 pounds per acre of nitrogen. If you're just starting out or know that your nitrogen may be limited, then look for some early successes with the vegetables that require the least amount of nitrogen. I feel like with these sources, you'll be able to calculate your own soil nutrient needs. And if you have if you need additional assistance, of course, you can give me a call. So soil health is nothing new. Clear back before the turn of the century, when I was in college, I learned about the physical, chemical, and biological components of the soil, how they interact with one another, and why it's important to the ecosystem within and above the soil profile. In this picture of my text, you can see the used book sticker still on the cover. Even in those days, I was interested in saving money. On the right side, you see a typical loam surface soil volume composition. 45% mineral soil that includes the sand, silt, and clay particles, up to about 5% organic matter, 25% air, and 25% water. Notice that an ideal soil is about 25% air. Air porosity is the portion of the bulk volume of soil that is filled up with air at any given time. So that's kind of important. North Carolina Extension shows a little more modern version of the same pie chart, but then they go on to illustrate that a compacted soil will have far less organic matter, far less airspace, and be made up of far more mineral soil on a percentage basis. This is the airspace in the soil that gives it gives soil its infiltration capability. Initially, the implementation of tillage seems beneficial for a seed bed as it is often conducted in fields abundant in organic matter. This organic matter contributes to favorable conditions, enhancing the seed bed for crop establishment. However, with successive rounds of tillage, the organic matter undergoes oxidation, and the initially positive impacts of tillage are gradually eclipsed by the negative consequences associated with the loss of the soil structure. And the continual breakdown of organic matter through repeated tillage diminishes the soil's structural integrity, leading to adverse effects on properties such as porosity, compaction, water retention, microbial activity, nutrient availability, and overall soil structure. This shift over time underscores the importance of considering the long-term implications of tillage practices on soil health and structure. Consequently, the smaller soil aggregates formed due to the breakdown introduced by tillage practices become highly susceptible to compaction when water weight is introduced to the soil profile from irrigation or rainfall. The diminished structural stability of the smaller aggregates makes them more prone to compaction. Compaction negatively impacts various soil properties, including porosity, permeability, and the overall structure, thereby influencing the soil's ability to retain and transport water effectively. This is from a journal article titled Comparing Infiltration Rates in Soils Managed with Conventional and Alternative Farming Methods, a meta-analysis. Infiltration plays a crucial role in the water cycle. Implementing the portion of precipitation available to plants versus that lost through runoff and evaporation. Conventional management, characterized by practices like tillage, absence of crop rotation, no livestock, and intermittent plant root cover, differs from alternative methods involving livestock presence, crop residues, continuous plant roots, and crop diversity. These alternatives can impact infiltration rates through various physical, chemical, or biological processes illustrated here. Perhaps the first thing you will notice is that water movement depth significantly increases in cover crop and perennial treatments. Potential biological changes include the introduction of bacteria and fungi, depicted as the yellow and orange symbols. Physical changes, as indicated by variations in the size and distribution of aggregates, result in alterations to porosity, compaction, and aggregation. And chemical changes are depicted by the differences in soil coloration, with the lighter hues in the conventional management and the darker shades in the alternative methods, representing the addition of carbon. Since I'm doing QR codes throughout this presentation, I thought I would include this one for this slide too. The artwork here is by Landon Johnson. The point of this slide is to illustrate that whether you are conventional or organic, if you are spoon feeding the nutrients to your crops and relying heavily on tillage, then in addition to breaking down the physical structure of the soil, you're missing out on the ability of the soil to perform its own biological and chemical processes. So a couple of weeks ago, during part one of this series, we talked about conservation planning and resource concerns, and I thought it would be interesting to look at likely resource concerns on these cropping systems for a moment. Okay, so I'll start with the conventional. Some of the soil resource concerns include sheet and rill erosion, if there's any slope to speak of, also wind erosion, ephemeral gully erosion, which are the little ditches or gullies that form after rain events. Subsidence, which I think we talked about, but it is the volume is a loss of volume of the soil caused by above normal microbial activity. This is typically caused by tillage, soil disturbance, for instance, but it can also be caused by excessive water drainage and extended drought. Definitely compaction is on the list. Management-induced soil compaction at any level throughout the soil profile, resulting in reduced plant productivity, biological activity, infiltration, and aeration. Organic matter depletion, very similar to subsidence, but it's management-induced depletion of any or all pools of soil organic matter. Soil organism habitat loss or degradation, aggregate instability, compaction. Okay, so then we get into the water resource concerns. Compaction often leads to things like ponding and flooding. Especially like on soils with very little slope. If you have compacted soils, it's more prone for ponding. Naturally available moisture use becomes a problem, as does inefficient irrigation water use. Sediments with any slope, sediments will be transported to surface water, along with nutrients, pesticides, and pathogens be transported to surface water through the erosion process. Okay, so enough of my Chicken Little perspective. Let's take another look here. By incorporating no-till, cover crop, and crop rotation, you'll be able to reduce or eliminate the effects of subsidence, compaction, organic matter depletion, soil organism habitat loss, aggregate instability, and most importantly, sheet and rill erosion. Ephemeral gully erosion may still be a problem based on several factors, but definitely less of one, and that may be addressed with vegetative or structural conservation practices. Ponding, naturally available moisture use, and inefficient irrigation water use will all be reduced or eliminated with no-till, cover crop, and crop rotation. Transported sediment and nutrients will be reduced to the amount that soil loss is reduced. So as I start to bring this concept of soil health and nutrient management full circle, I want to draw your attention to the picture on the left. So I'll avoid getting too caught up in the arrows, but the caption reads, a greatly simplified diagram of the food web involved in the breakdown of higher plant tissue. The boxes represent broad groups of organisms and pools of organic material, while the arrows represent transfers of carbon, energy, and nutrients between these pools. Because they capture carbon dioxide and energy, the higher plants are known as primary producers. Heavy arrows from the plant debris or detritus to various organism groups represent primary consumption. The arrows within the box represent secondary and tertiary consumption. Although all of the groups shown play important roles in the process, the microorganisms represented by the lower three boxes account for 80 to 90% of the total metabolic activity. As a result of the metabolism, soil humus is synthesized, and carbon dioxide and heat energy are released into the soil environment. Of course, these things are great, but The important thing to agricultural production is that mineral nutrients are also released and that are now available for plant consumption. In the process of soil organic matter formation, essential nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur become integrated into the soil structure, transforming it into a reservoir for these and other nutrients. As soil organic matter decomposes, nutrients are released, becoming available for plant uptake. Typically, 2 to 5% of soil organic matter decomposes each year, releasing nutrients for plant uptake. In this slide, we're looking at data from 2 soil tests that include 5 measurements. And so at this point, I'm kind of moving into the biological components. There are 2 scenarios here. The top row is simply an undisturbed hedgerow right next to the crop field. And the bottom row is a minimally tilled field where corn and soybeans are in a crop rotation. These samples were taken on January 20th. The ground was not frozen. So this first test, active carbon measured by permanganate oxidation, or POXC, is the soil health indicator that represents the amount of microbial food available. Again, this is on January 20th. The second test is soil organic carbon. It's a measurement of by dry combustion, and this it's the percent organic carbon test. Soil organic carbon is the soil health indicator for carbon storage and soil organic matter. The third test shows wet macro aggregate stability and is a method for testing how well the soil aggregates resist breaking apart under water pressure, which indicates the size and amount of water-stable aggregates. And the fourth column is a respiration test that is an indicator of microbial activity and measured by the amount of carbon dioxide gas released from the soil sample over a period of 1 to 4 days. The fifth test on the right side is a protein test that measures the amount of protein-like substances in soil organic materials, which indicates the amount of nitrogen potentially available for plants and microorganisms. I'm going to cover these 2 tests in a little. Additional detail, respiration, and indicator of microbial activity in grams of CO2 per gram of dry weight, high range of the scale, by 0.21 milligrams of CO2 per. The soil test was conducted in the dead of winter, January 20th. However, the respiratory processes continued in the hedgerow. Implementing cover crops will result in similar soil respiration activity throughout the year in the crop field. And why does it matter if there is respiration happening in the winter? In a system where respiration has stopped, it takes time for it to begin again. Biological and chemical processes must get rebooted when the new crop is planted after a fallow period. In systems where respiration does not stop, for example, systems with living plants throughout the winter, the soil function is already carrying out its function when the cash crop is planted in the spring, and there is no time lost to regenerating those chemical and biological and physical processes. The ACE protein test is a soil protein index that indicates the amount of nitrogen potentially available for crops or any plants and microorganisms within the system. The hedgerow on January 20th had 7.5 milligrams per gram of dry weight ACE proteins, which gives it a score of medium, whereas the crop field had a score of 4.9 milligrams per gram of dry weight, which puts it in the low to very low category. I feel like these tests reflect what we saw in this illustration. Increased biological and chemical processes and better soil structure are available to the soil the more you can emulate a perennial system. I'll admit that we've covered a lot of ground today, so I'll wrap it up with this. Today we talked about how soil health is the suite of biological, chemical, and physical properties which enable soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains all life above and below the soil surface. We talked about how soil pH is important for the availability of fungi, bacteria, actinomycetes, as well as almost all the nutrients in the soil. You have sources that will help you start to plan the soil chemistry of your operation. Then we started learning about compacted soils and the role they play in creating resource concerns or natural resource problems. And we reviewed some of the biological processes and how they result in plant available mineral nutrients, followed by a brief introduction of what you can expect from an NRCS soil health test. For my contact info, I'm going to stick with the QR codes. The code on the left takes you to my website, and the one on the right opens an email from your device that has my address on it. If you are participating for soil and water CEUs through the Certified Crop Advisors program, then please email me with your certification number. And this is for participants of the live portion of the live viewing of this program only. And this presentation was the second in the NOFA New Jersey series, Sustainable Farm Management. Next month, along with other things, I'm going to cover the various types of plans that NRCS has available for technical service providers to write. And I'll just give you a little teaser for the upcoming webinar. I think that the Soil Health Plan is the most valuable document that you can get from NRCS right now. And NRCS does have the ability to provide financial assistance for the Soil Health Plan. I'll add that New Jersey NRCS sign-up deadline is Friday, October 20th, 2003. So if you need one of these plans, or if you think you have resource concerns that need to be addressed, then sign up with your local field office this week. And with that, my presentation has concluded. Scott?
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much, John. There's a lot of us still here. I invite folks to unmute themselves and ask questions. We've definitely got about 15 minutes or so. Just to kind of kick things off, I really appreciate the point in the slide where you include the microorganisms in that pH chart. I mean, for years in agriculture, I've seen that pH chart just showing your NPK and some micronutrients. It's a
1997.
Right, but like somehow like
this is not new material,
nobody included those top two lines, and like so many that I've ever seen. It's just
I know.
Yeah, forget about those. And yet they're eminently important. All the little critters. I mean, they're cycling those nutrients. They're holding on to that carbon. Their little bodies are holding on to those nutrients. So, without them and their relationship to our pH, we're struggling. So I appreciate that. It's a great talk. There's a lot of importance to nutrient management. and it's far more nuanced in the organic realm than the conventional farmers tend to have you believe. For years, I just, like just put your pencil on paper and just calculate how much NPK you need, and it's all just percentages, and off you go. And as soon as you start transitioning ground that's been conventional into organics, you immediately realize that it isn't all just percentages. Like you've got to get that biology working.
That's exactly right. And I think that's going to be the key. And that's really where I feel like these soil health practices that include things like a really robust cover crop are going to be very important, because they'll help keep that soil biology working throughout the wintertime, so that when spring hits, you've got all these little seeds in the ground trying to grow, and there's already a system there that's supporting them. I think that's the key element.
Yeah, I was actually just doing some work for another farmer and looking at biofumigant properties in like the super hot mustards, like the caliente mustards, and usually thought of as something that you grow in the summertime or late spring. You chop it all down, you mix it into your soil. It kills lots of bad news soil organisms at that time. But what I was picking up on is like that winter period where you've got this in the ground, you've got exudates coming out of the root system. You've constantly got positive effects from these crops that you're growing throughout that, what we consider dormant period. Because it's not really dormant. It looks to us to be all the world dormant, but there's still a lot going on down there.
I wish I
Especially
had
now that we have
included a
freeze.
picture of this hedgerow where I did this soil health test that I included. It's nothing special. I mean, it didn't even have all that much plant growth in it. It was just some vines and, weedy. It was just kind of a weedy. It was just literally a hedgerow. And so, but I couldn't believe, in comparison to the field, how much of a difference there was. And this was, January 20th. I thought, when I went out there, I thought, what's the purpose of me going out here? This is ridiculous. But then when I got those test results back, I was really kind of surprised.
Yeah, stuff's still going on. And the hedgerows are a great kind of control in that regard, because they're frequently getting the nutrients are getting spread, beyond the margin of the field. The water that you might be putting out is getting beyond the margins of the field. So in many cases, it's getting a lot of the same treatment that your field space is getting, but it's not getting all that tillage.
Right.
And it's got constant cover.
Right. Yeah. And then the important thing about tillage is, like, it's going to be hard to eliminate it from the system, and I get that. But one of the things my presentation didn't really cover is that there's a model is typically used for soil loss. It's the Russell 2 equation. It's typically used for soil loss, but it can actually also be used to calculate the soil condition index. And that's an indicator of whether the organic matter in the soil is increasing or decreasing. So it takes into account the tillage practices that are taking place, and then gives you either a positive or negative reading. Are you using up carbon organic matter, or are you adding it? And so that's a pretty neat function of that program. Something that, if you're curious about how much tillage you can kind of afford to incorporate into your system without losing too much organic matter, that might be an option.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been frustrated over the years by folks who you just recognize that like reduction is the goal. I don't want people to walk away feeling like you have to throw away your tiller and you can never use it again, because they can be valuable tools. Your chisel plows and your various techniques for loosening your soils. But we always want to be designing systems that whenever possible do multiple jobs with a single pass, get as much impact out of one disturbance as you possibly can, and whenever possible, just eliminate it. Knock a step out.
Maybe things like looking at the depth of the tillage, or maybe, for instance, like tillage is going to be very important for an organic system because it's a fantastic weed killer. I mean, honestly. And so maybe there are mulches that can be used, cover crops that you can lay down um, to help cover the soil, keep weeds from growing in the first place if the cover crop is thick enough. But I mean, it's going to be hard to totally get away from it. But like you said, just try to use it judiciously, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. There's still quite a few people in the room. Does anybody have anything to add, share, ask? Any of you guys having challenges with nutrients, nutrient management calculations, sources? I've kind of always been a little bit mystified by the, like you grow winter peas and maybe your rye and winter peas, or triticale and winter peas, and trying to figure out how much nitrogen I get left over from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I frequently, when I was really busy with vegetable production, I often just kind of didn't. I just pretended that extra nitrogen wasn't there and went on with my calculatable manure application or blood meal or whatever it might have been that I was using at the time. But that wasn't the most economic way to go about it. So how do you get at some of those latent or cover
It's
crop
not
sources?
easy. It really isn't easy to calculate, because whenever you look it up, there's a whole range. There's Penn State. Is it Chris White? I think, or Charles White. I can't quite remember his name, but he's got this new process whereby he takes into account lots of different factors, and he's able to come up with a value. But he's a soil chemist with Penn State, and I've looked at it. I think it's got fantastic potential, but it's one of those things that unless you have the actual value for something, then you're just kind of making guesses. And it's another one that takes in lots of different bits of information to kind of give you a value of how much nitrogen you've got. But I didn't share that one on this deal. I could put in anybody in contact with it if you want to learn more about it. But it is a difficult process, no matter how you slice it.
I guess it's a vote of confidence for the simple old timey concept of the the log, right? Keeping track of like a diary of what's going on. That's going to tell you what that leftover crop residue did for you early season, as much as trying to calculate it, I suppose.
Right.
Keeping track of where you had cover crop and how things behaved in that subsequent croppings.
And I think a lot of it's going to just deal, like the approach that I kind of take is just through experience. Just like, okay, I think that I've got quite a bit this year, so let me try. I try a few things, maybe that have a little bit higher nitrogen need, and then we'll see if it actually supplies it or not.
Yeah, I guess, and nitrogen is kind of the easy one in many respects. You've got options, and you can get quickly available stuff. You can have more slowly available stuff. With the more slowly available nitrogens, like pea residue or some of the peanut meals, those things stick around for a while, right? They're slow to break down comparatively.
Well, because I guess one other area that this presentation really didn't delve into was the idea of the inorganic versus the organic nitrogen components. And so those slow releases are going to have a higher organic nitrogen component, where just like your organic matter in the soil, it's providing nitrogen, but it's providing nitrogen as it goes through that breakdown process. And so yeah, it's going to stick around because it's got that organic component and the inorganic immediately available nitrogen. It's through like ammonia and nitrates.
So it's basically a slow release fertilizer kind of built into the system. So if you've got something maybe like a baby leaf salad green crop that's going to be really rocketing out of the ground, you might need to boost that, even if your kind of residue math is saying I've got 120 pounds per acre of nitrogen credit, but that's kind of 120 pounds over the course of the season, not in a 4 to 6 week period while you're growing baby leaf. Yeah.
Right.
To move on to a more complicated, in my view, nutrient in the spectrum, like what about phosphorus and doing wonderful cover crops like buckwheat? How does buckwheat work to work? How does it work on phosphorus? Because I always hear everybody, you know, it's great. It metabolizes phosphorus from the soil. It makes it brings it up and available to subsequent crops. It's just able to digest it where other plant root exudates are not.
I am going to have to get back to you on that one, Scott.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'm
just peppering you with questions at this point because nobody else wants to chime in.
No,
so I figure I'd take the whole.
Yep. No, I think that's good. But one of the interesting things about phosphorus is that it is immobile in the soil. And so, by cycling it through something like the buckwheat, it does in a system where it's not in a system where you're not implementing tillage, which moves the phosphorus through the system, then it does a good job of helping to, I guess, move that phosphorus through the soil profile.
Okay, just kind of bring it back up to where more shallow rooted crops might have an easier time of getting a hold of it.
Right.
Okay.
So,
well, we've still got about 4 minutes. Does anybody else want to chime in? I mean, I could keep talking John's ear off all night, but it's also approaching 8 o'clock. I'm not seeing anybody pop up in the chat or unmute their video. Okay. John, do you have any final words for us?
No, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff as far as the conservation aspects go. And so I just encourage you, if you've got, questions, things you're thinking about, things you want a little bit of additional help looking at, give me a call, and we'll talk about it.
Very good. If anybody missed anything and they want to revisit this, we did record tonight's event. We can connect you with that recording. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at NOFA New Jersey. I am now on board as the technical assistant with NOFA, so you probably get filtered to me, and I'll help get you out to folks like John who know more than me. And if you're not a member already, please make sure you become a member and help support the good work that we all do. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye, y'all.